Yes, Judge. Respectfully, we concur obviously with Mr. Saffold. This was a terrible day, and I know every time I've talked with my client, he feels upset for the family of Ramses Hurley. I would highlight, Judge, that he too has regret for what had occurred that day, in that if he never would have left his house, it was Father's Day, if he would have stayed with his mom that day, this never would have happened, and Mr. Ramses Hurley would be alive today. That being said, Judge, I would point out that I've talked about 2919B, which the court has before it, and it was enacted in law in April of 2021, and it talks about crimes, serious crimes committed by youthful offenders, and it points to some things that the court should consider. And Judge, as you're aware, that arena talks about the chronicle age of the offender, and at the time of the offense, his intellectual capacity. We know he was only 17 years old at the time. His immaturity, his impetuosity for being only 17, and that's IMPETUOSITY, and it's actually in the code. And also his failure to appreciate the risks and consequences of his actions. That being said, Judge, it also points about family and home life, and I would point out my client was raised by a single mom. She did a real strong job in raising Jaidee and the other children in her family, but she also worked about 60 hours a week. She's in the courtroom. She also feels horrible for the loss of Ramses Hurley, and also for the situation now that my client is in. She does not want to speak. She said, I'll just break down and cry. But she is here, and her name is Jerome Miree. Judge, I would also highlight the fact that my client's father was in prison for a number of years on a couple of, I think, prison sentences, including an 8-year prison sentence delivered by Judge Nugent. So his father wasn't in his life. Judge, I would also point out the circumstances of the offense, and I think we know that at least during much of the testimony we heard, my client never left the front right seat of the vehicle. It also points out, Judge, the kind of the incompetency that's just associated with youth, and the fact that his inability to maybe understand the law and any possible resolution of cases or working with his attorneys. And finally, Judge, I think this is most important, the offender's rehabilitation. This occurred when he was 17. He's currently 19 years old. Judge, I have Defendant's Exhibit A before me, and as the court's aware, my client, I believe, spent over 500 days in the detention facility here in the juvenile court. And I've shown this to Mr. Oladala. I've shown it to Ms. Bryan and also to the court. And it's basically his resident adjustment report. And it finds him to be excellent in all matters, certainly staff interactions, resident interactions, participation in mental health services, his educational programming, recreational programming, and behavioral management programming, all excellent, Judge. And I would just highlight a summary. It talks about resident Miree. He's resided at the juvenile facility. It talks about when engaging with staff, it's reported that the resident Miree is respectful, follows all directives, meets all daily expectations. Resident Miree communicates with all staff appropriately. He has completed credit hours needed for graduation. It's my understanding he did get his GED while in the facility. And it indicates that he has presently achieved a level 3 star mentor within the parameters of the behavioral management program. And so, Judge, he was only 17 at the time of this incident. He's now 19. He's going to spend quite a bit of time in the prison system, but I think he's going to continue to take programming to make sure that in the future he'll come out and be a productive, law-abiding member of the community, and I know that's his plan. And then obviously, as I would reiterate what Mr. Saffold indicated, which is my client certainly plans to appeal, and he certainly has high hopes for that. But I want you to know that at least right now, My client is focused on becoming a better person whenever he gets out of jail. And Judge, he throws himself at the mercy of the court. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I've got this marked as Defendant's Exhibit A.
All right, thank you. I know for the families, Mr. Duncan and Mr. Miree, the counsel have already indicated that nobody wishes to speak, but I'll still give you the opportunity if anybody has changed their mind, and also just sort of your family members here, these young men, appreciate your being here, but I want you to know that I do, so thank you. Mr. O'Dell, anything on behalf of the government then?
Yes, Your Honor. If this is the Honorable Court, Your Honor, I do have several family members here today on behalf of Ramses Hurley who wish to address this court, and I'd ask this court to hear from them at this time.
Sure.
First up will be Michelle Hurley.
Good morning, how are you?
Well, thank you.
I'm very nervous.
Well, so a couple things. It looks like you may have something to read from, which is fine.
Yes.
But I would ask you to be mindful to read slow enough for our court reporter. Sometimes when we read a little faster than our county court reporters can take down.
Okay.
And I'm not in a hurry, so, okay? Whenever
Okay.
you're ready.
Okay. Well, I'm Michelle. I'm one of Ramsey's older sisters. I'm not the oldest. Okay, Michelle, Michelle, Hurley, Hurley. Until I had to sit back and think about what I wanted to say to these people, I didn't realize how angry I still was. I pretended I was in the acceptance stage, but I was lying to myself. Through those 4 weeks, and I really don't have anything written, it's just coming from my heart. Those 4 weeks at trial, actually being in this room with these people was the second worst experience of my life. Ramses was put on trial for doing something 85% of high schoolers do: smoke weed, smoke marijuana. It's not something that's strange. He didn't sell crack or heroin. He didn't hurt people. He sat in the basement for 2 months. And I always said, Ramsey, go hang out with your friends. But he said no, he wanted to work on his business. Then those 2 months, he started losing his hair. And I was sad for him because I thought he just didn't want to go outside. But he just said, I'm just working. I want to make this business right. He was making bracelets with my mom. And the day before Ramsey passed away, I wish I had more time to, be around him, but he was so focused on Father's Day. He said to us in our text, we had a family group message, and he said, this is about Daddy, because my parents are divorced, and my dad, we left him and he was by himself. He said, Daddy deserves to know that we love him. We have to give him a big gift, something huge, something nice, like just to know that we care. And I was like, well, I could go to the Coach outlet and get him a wallet because he needed a new wallet. He said, no, that's not good enough. Daddy needs to know that we love him. So Ramsey went out and he bought my dad some Ray-Ban glasses. And I remember he came in the door and he said, I got Daddy these glasses. Tell him it's from all of us, because we didn't put in anything. And I said, okay. He went back into the basement, and I was upstairs with my kids making Father's Day cards. The next day, Ramsey, all I seen was Ramsey go to the bathroom. And I thought, okay, I'll be back after I get off of work. I was only at work for an hour. And then my family just kept calling. They kept calling. I'm like, why are they calling me? I'm at work. They know I'm at work. And they said, Ramsey was shot. That's what we thought. Ramsey was shot. So I knew it wasn't good. I just felt it in my heart. And this is we suffer from PTSD because I know exactly what street I was on. I know exactly the way. Every time I take those way, I know what I was thinking in my heart. Just praying to God, I want Ramsey to be safe. We got to the hospital. He died. I still remember the day Ramsey was born and everything that happened. Like, I don't remember a lot about my childhood, but that day was, my parents made us go to our neighbor's house and we didn't want to go. But that was the day Ramsey was born. He had big dreams. He was so family oriented. He only cared about his family and making sure that we stuck together. And even days when I didn't want to stick together, like he would tell me, Michelle, you smarter than that. Like, you just need to calm down and listen. You know, this is your family, this is all you got. And I had text messages from him. He sent me this long paragraph this day. I got into it with my sister. And he said, I didn't like how you spoke to her. And at that moment, I was like, Ramsey, what do you know? You're 19 years old. You don't know anything. And then when he passed, I was in a hospital room with my mom, and I read those messages, and he told me, he said that he loves the way we are right now. And he couldn't imagine if anything was to happen to any one of us, like he would be heartbroken. He didn't even want to talk about it. I'm sorry, I'm going all over the place. But back to when we were in court and he was criminalized and how they spoke about him. Ramsey was nothing like that. And how they said he had no regrets for pushing my brother out the car. Yes, it was Father's Day, but y'all thought about robbing him. And now my dad, for the rest of his life, he can't even celebrate Father's Day the same. He pretend like this moment doesn't even exist in our lives. And that's what I heard from my parents, like my dad. It would just never be the same. And then I have two little kids, and I had to explain to them that somebody could be here one day and gone the next. And Ramsey was such a good uncle. He was such a good uncle. He was great. He was a great uncle. They loved him. He would stay in the basement and play video games with Mortal Kombat all the time.
How old are your children?
They were 4 and 6 at the time. And my oldest had to explain that to my daughter that his body was in a box, but his soul is in heaven. Even when he was going to Tri-C for the little time that he did, Ramsey would make it home every day. Me and my sister worked later, and we couldn't get the kids off the bus. But he would leave his class so early to make sure those kids was off the school bus, and they didn't return to the school because I was so mad at him if that ever happened. But I remember one day, he was late, and I'm yelling at him. Like, Ramsey, how could you let the kids just stay on the school bus? And he was like, I'm down the street. He made sure he was there. He just didn't deserve what happened to him. He still doesn't. Also, I want the court to know, yes, they have great lawyers or whatever, but eventually if someone keeps robbing people, someone will die from it. And I know the law, and the law sucks, because my brother, got out of jail, and my brother dies from another robbery. He dies in the midst of it. If the court would have kept him in jail, my brother would be here. I would have never met you people. No offense, I don't want to be here. This is the worst experience of my life, being in this situation. But if the court would have kept him in jail, my brother would be here, and we wouldn't have to go through this type of pain. I wouldn't wish it on anyone in the world. I wouldn't wish it on them. I wouldn't wish it on them at all, because it's not fair. I don't have anything else to say.
Thank you for taking the time to come in. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Your Honor. Our next up will be Amanda Austin.
Ma'am, are you Miss Austin?
I am.
Good morning. What would you like to do now?
On the first day of the trial, Mr. Southwell objected to my mom being a character witness for Ramses. Throughout the trial, no one was allowed to speak on his behalf. We endured 2 weeks of the defense mischaracterizing my brother. I'm here today to tell you about Ramses and why the actions of the defendants have devastated our family. Ramses had a plan for his life and the lives of our family. I can't help but wonder if I had just looked out the window or noticed he had went outside, could I have saved him? I never thought an hour prior to his death, the conversation we had about the importance of family would be our last. It saddens me that Ramses could not see his nieces and nephews grow up. He was very important in their lives, and they miss him greatly. I am haunted by the fact he would never be able to fulfill his goals in life. In concert with my mom, my brother started a custom-made bracelet business that provides healing properties. My brother possessed a calm spirit. I never once seen his eyes greatly. I am haunted by the fact he would never be able to fulfill his goals in life. In concert with my mom, my brother started a custom-made bracelet business that provides healing properties. My brother possessed a calm spirit. I never once seen his eyes filled with rage, as described by Desmond Duncan. It was my hope that the defendants would accept some responsibility for their actions, but on June 17th, 2021, I came to the realization the moment would never happen. While testifying on his own behalf, Desmond Duncan stated that he did not regret killing my brother, and he would do it again under the same circumstances. That was exactly 2 years ago, almost to the day, that he participated in the murder of Ramses. Hearing those words was like receiving a punch to my gut that left me breathless. In his actions and with his words, Desmond demonstrated absolutely zero remorse for murdering my brother. Every day during the trial, it was traumatizing to hear from the other side of the door, shackles being removed from the defendants. All I could think about is how sad this is for both families. The realization of more Black men being lost to the prison system and to the grave. This trial has made me sad for my own son, because as mothers, we do all we can to protect our children and set them on the right path. Being convicted of murdering someone else's child is not what we have in mind. But here we are, 2 families devastated by the current circumstances. It was difficult for me and my family to read about the cause of Ramses' death, so we chose not to do so. To hear during the trial that my brother died of a hinge fracture, which cut off his ability to breathe, is more than I can bear. Knowing my brother suffered for any moment of time will haunt me for the rest of my life. I often cry out for him, and reality sets in that he is no longer with us. It is a surreal feeling. It's suffocating that I would never see him again and be able to talk to him, see him grow and have a family of his own. One of my fondest memories was a conversation I had with Ramses on my birthday. He told me that I taught him a lot and that he appreciated me. Most importantly, that day, my baby brother told me that he loved me. My heart swelled with pride when he said those words to me, which he had never expressed before. That was the last birthday I spent with my brother. The moment we received the guilty verdicts was bittersweet for my family. It was hard to be happy at such a solemn occasion. Ramses is never coming home, and these 2 young men's lives are ruined. Standing here today before the court to ask that the defendants be punished to the fullest extent of the law is not a joyous occasion. I feel terrible about that. I feel terrible that my brother is not here, but I just feel terrible for everybody. That being said, Judge Gall, please take into consideration that Ramses is lost to us forever.
We are forced to live with the fact that the people who took his life feel no remorse. That's all.
Well, thank you, Ms. Austin, I appreciate it. Anyone else? Mr. Amador?
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, this case is a tragedy. Ramses Hurley was 19. Everybody in that car were young kids, but they were engaged in things that they shouldn't have been engaged in. Ramses had a bright future, and he no longer has that future. And it's because of the actions of these two young men in this courtroom today. The state of Ohio would ask that you sentence them appropriately. As the statute reads, both of these individuals should receive life in prison with the first chance of parole eligibility after 15 years. They both have subsequent counts, and I would argue to Your Honor that significant are those counts, that they should be run consecutive with the murder charge that they were both convicted of by a jury. Improper handling firearms in a motor vehicle for Mr. Duncan, and improper handling of firearms in a motor vehicle, along with tampering of evidence for Mr. Miree. Oftentimes when we come into the courtroom, Your Honor, the goal that's stated by many people is to seek the truth. And it's difficult to seek the truth when items or materials, evidence that was left in the car is thrown away by individuals. And in this case, the juries found Mr. Miree guilty of that. They found him guilty of tampering with evidence. And I think that's the worst form of offense when it relates back to a murder or relates back to a homicide. And I think he should be run consecutive. That count should be run consecutive with his murder conviction, as well as the improper handling of murder. I know defense counsels for Mr. Miree has given you a defense exhibit. I'd ask to take a look at that, take a look at his criminal history and his background. And when you talk about youth and inexperience, I would argue that Mr. Miree has a depth of experience with the criminal justice system, and that should not apply to him. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Amador. Mr. Duncan, I'll start with you. Sir, is there anything you'd like me to know on your own behalf?
No, sir.
Mr. Miree, anything you'd like me to know on your own behalf? Well, gentlemen, let me begin by advising you of your appellate rights. And you understand that you have a right to appeal this matter within 30 days after the filing of the court's sentencing entry. You understand that, Mr. Duncan?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Miree? Yes, sir. You understand that if you are unable to pay for the cost of the transcript, the record, and all relevant documents required for the appeal, they will be provided without cost to you. Do you understand that, Mr. Duncan?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Miree? Yes, sir. You understand that if you are unable to pay for an appeal, you are entitled to have the notice of appeal filed without any payment of a filing fee. You understand that, Mr. Duncan?
Yes, sir.
You understand that, Mr. Miree?
Yes, sir.
You understand that if you're unable to obtain counsel for the appeal, counsel will be appointed for you at no cost. You understand that, Mr. Duncan?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Miree? Yes, sir. All right. Gentlemen, there's not much that I can say that hasn't already been said by Mr. Hurley's sisters, and I think they were spot on, including the fact that there's 3 lives that are just down the toilet today. And oftentimes I find myself in this situation where I'm not necessarily at a loss of words, but I find myself with the realization that there's not much else I can say here that's going to make a difference. Unfortunately, nothing I can say or do is going to bring that young man back. Nothing I can say or do is going to stop you from spending the next, if I had to guess, probably, say of an appeal, 20 plus years at least in the penitentiary, half your life, or your life at this point in time. So it doesn't really do me any good to sit here and lecture you, but maybe for a message for everybody else to understand that you can't be doing this stuff. And you guys have a record which at least supports an argument that this isn't your first foray into the system. You should have known better. I give Mr. Cafferty his arguments to say you're young men, and maybe you're not as wise as you would or should be or will become. But this isn't just your first spot here. You play with fire, you're gonna get burnt. And whether it was Miss Austin or Miss Hurley who indicated that, you're gonna either end up in prison or underground. It's just a sad reality that here we are. And it is a shame, and it is tragic. I'm disappointed that you didn't learn from your past mistakes. I'm disappointed that you failed to really accept responsibility for what has transpired here. Be that as it may, after considering the purposes and principles set forth in felony sentencing, I will find that you're not amenable to a community control sanction. The state is elected to proceed on count 2. And count 2 would be for both of you a life sentence without the possibility of, with the possibility of parole after serving 15 years. On count 7, it'd be a 12-month sentence. Mr. Miree, on count 9, it'll also be a 12-month sentence. And Mr. Miree, also in case 646985, will be a 12-month sentence. I'll run all those sentences concurrent with your life sentence